Welcome to the Healthy Habits for Life podcast. I'm Dr. Carol Perlman, a psychologist, habit coach, and married mom of two boys. I'm the guru of all things pertaining to habits and teach systems and strategies to help you work more efficiently and free up more time for self-care. Time management is my jam. You'll find me surrounded by planners and journals, creating time for exercise, cooking, and playing tennis. And I'll teach you how to create the work-life balance that helps you thrive and create the life you desire. Tune in each week as I share my best strategies, systems, and hacks for creating and sustaining daily habits for a productive and healthy lifestyle, and chat with other experts in the health and wellness industry. Now, on to this week's episode. Hello, everyone. I am here today with my longtime friend, colleague, fellow podcast host, Lisa Cohen, and I'm so excited to have her here today. We are going to do a live coaching session, and it's going to be really good. I'm excited for Lisa's aha moments, and we are both excited to share them with all of the listeners because we know if Lisa is a busy working mom experiencing all these challenges, we know that there's so many others out there. And we wanted to kind of shine some light on how we can pave the way to making that easier. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I think this is perfect based on our last conversation and knowing that you have formed expert coursework in just this area. And I sort of set myself up, but I'm happy to do it.
You totally did. You didn't realize it, but let me just add that in case anyone didn't hear. So I was a guest on your podcast a couple of weeks ago. And as we were talking about various things pertaining to habits and daily flow, you said something that really caught my attention. And it was something around one thing I'm afraid or I'm reluctant to schedule too much because something always goes awry in the day or something unexpected comes up and then the whole day is kind of thrown off. And so you've kind of taken the position of why bother? Because, and that's just sort of, it feels like the MO is that every day is just up in the air and it's an like ever changing experience. And that just really stood out to me. Number one, because it's so common. It is the reality. No day ever goes perfectly as planned. But I kind of felt like you were maybe missing some concrete strategies around what to do when that happens so that you kind of pull yourself back in, feel in control, feel intentional. And so I reached out to you afterwards and I said, Lisa, we have to go back to that. Can we do some live coaching around this? Because we have to go back and solve this a little bit better for you. And so that brought us to our conversation today. So before we dive into that, can you give our listeners just a little background on what are the various things that you do that you're juggling that you have to factor in day to day?
Mhm. Sure. So I think that was a perfect explanation. And that's truly how I feel. I'm a new podcast host, so I've added that sort of in to my daily life, which was already I felt somewhat full. And I think what's interesting about when you have I'm going to just call it this luxury to get to work from home. And
Mhm.
so when you get that, you have all this flexibility built in because you have to get your work done, but unless you have to be in front of a computer at a meeting, you have all this open time.
Yes.
So here I had all this open time. I had things I had to get done, but I had all this flexibility. And then I added something new in, and it really just felt like, oh, I actually have things now I have to get done each and every single day.
Hmm.
And they're somewhat mundane. Some of them are exciting, like an interview, but some of the things around the whole podcast launch was like very routine,
Yeah.
wrote things. And so I felt like, wow, this would kind of be a good time to relook at how I operate, like my
Hmm.
daily method of operation. I feel like that's a name for something, like to
Oh,
just
I love that. I'm going to write that down. Yep.
think method of operation. I feel like that's sort of like, so I kind of took a look loosely and said, okay, well, I function the way I function, and I've learned to live like this, which is allowing me to feel somewhat in control, even though logically I knew and I know that's not the way to feel in control. Like if you're scheduled, you're in control. And when you and I had a minute to talk just before jumping on, I reflected because I've been thinking about this since we knew we were going to get together. When I had that Franklin planner, which maybe
Mhm.
that was like the first planner I ever had, and I used to
Yep.
like buy the inserts like in my first career, and I loved that thing. It was almost like a little suitcase that had
Yep.
handles. and I would use it and I would write everything in. And, not that long ago, I found some of my old ones from college that were in with old notebooks that were stored. And I used to write every appointment, everything. And I found that with an online calendar, sometimes I don't add everything in. And then it
Mhm.
becomes like a snowball. It's like, well, if you know you have this standing appointment every Friday at 10 o'clock, why bother?
Mhm.
And so,
So let me back up for one quick second, because what you said is just so insightful. The way I talk about it with my clients is that success leaves clues. And so you just stumbled upon a clue that when you look back, the time when you felt most in control, it was because you were using this paper planner system and it was really detailed. You filled it out in really great detail. And so for various reasons, you have gotten away from it. And I think it's been sort of challenging as many of us move to a digital system. The digital systems are phenomenal because we always have them with us. How many of us are going to carry around that little suitcase planner type thing now? We're not, so the good thing is we have our phones, so we always have access to a digital calendar or system. But for some people and for some brains, it's not the same as the paper version where you can look at it. And some brains process that information differently. So we're going to get into that sort of this decision between paper versus digital, but I wanted to highlight that clue that planning in more detail led you to feel more in control. And as you've gotten away from that, you are feeling, what words would you use? I don't want to put them in your mouth. So, what words would you use when you think about your current, I'll use your term, daily method of operation? What words come to mind?
I often say I fly by the seat of my pants. I know that's not ideal, but it works. And so I just haven't disrupted it. But now that I've added something new in, it's already disrupted. So it's like I have to just acknowledge it worked for some time for a chapter. And all I'm doing is talking about this new chapter, this
Yeah,
new 2.0. And so this new point 2.0 is going to require more organization. There's more moving parts than there's ever been,
yeah,
more emails than I've ever had in terms of accounts. And so it's new. All of this is new for me. So it's such a good time to kind of reflect
it
and look
is.
at it. Because one of the things that I thought I did well, and then when we were talking, when you were on my podcast, we were talking about multitasking. And it
Mhm.
was really the first time I really thought about, I think I'm a good multitasker. But when I reflected, I'm like, really? Are you like, it's a known entity that it's not the best way for your brain to work. And I always think, well, women can multitask. That's what we do. But now I know better. And so, I'm a little bit more insightful with how I'm doing that. So the calendar and the multitasking kind of go one in the same.
Totally. Yeah. So let
Um,
me ask you this. How would you know when you say, in this 1.0 life with what you had going on, let's just fill in, you have three kids, you're very involved with their lives, you're a dietitian, you've worked in various capacities over the years, you run a household, you're very involved with your community, you had another business that you were operating for many years that I think you still do to, some degree. So you've had a lot going on. So how do you know when your system is working for you?
mm, that's a great question. How do I know? I would say, well, feeling in control. I think that's
Hmm.
the thing. Like, so, and this is probably maybe an overshare with your audience, but I'll just say this. I feel like I was most in control as my kids were younger. As
Hmm.
they got older, it became much harder. Like, meaning that we had decision making all our own. Like, we
Right.
were the drivers, we were this. And I've really been reflective on that because this chapter of parenting college age kids, way different.
Hmm.
And I feel it. I feel it from that standpoint. So, in control is a word that I've used often. And so
Hmm.
when my schedule is working for me, I feel like I'm in flow.
And when you're in control or in flow, what's different about your life?
I feel like I'm never late. I'm
Hmm.
not someone who um, I don't, it's not that I don't enjoy being late. I don't want to be late. So that causes me stress.
Hmm.
So I will cut someone off in the middle of a meeting because I frequently linger. I'm a chatty person. So I'll be like, oh my gosh, I love talking to you, but I gotta run. And that makes me feel really stressed. I would prefer to know how much time I have so that I can relax upon whether it's leaving an exercise class, an appointment, a pre-interview, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's all the same because
Hmm.
I'm always running late. And so
Hmm.
I won't be late, so it causes stress. So I'll cut things short, or I'll say, you know what, I can't actually dry my nails at this appointment. I gotta go. Uh,
Hmm.
or oh, I can't stay and stretch. I gotta go because
Almost
I'm
sounds like everything becomes incomplete, or, like you can't finish it to the 100% degree that you would want because you're already kind of blending into the next thing.
yeah. I would say that's really accurate. And on days where it's not as busy, then I have that flexibility.
Yeah.
And I love to be flexible. That's the thing, which is kind of in opposite to what I'm sharing. I feel like I really do love to be able to say, you know what, I can meet you for lunch. Or you know what, you need a ride to the airport? I'd love to bring you. I can do that. Like I'm happy to do that. We can get together and talk while I'm driving you. Like that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I do love to have open schedule and flexibility. I do feel like I prioritize to a very high level relationships and friendships. And so I will take that phone call, I will take that extra time. And just as an example, you and I were scheduled to meet at 1 o'clock today. At 12:45, I got a very important phone call. I thought for a second I probably shouldn't take this call because my mind is going to
Mhm.
be, and I only have 15 minutes. It's Sunday, by the way. I should probably
Yep.
preface saying that, we're doing this together because it worked for our schedules, but it is a Sunday. It's a relaxed day. I'm not overscheduled. Um, but it's like I will take that extra call.
Hmm.
I'll grab that call. I will call a friend back, a family member back. And I feel that sometimes that interjects and makes the schedule more
Yeah.
perhaps than it needs to be.
Everything I'm excited for you to play this back later because we haven't dived into the nitty-gritty yet and the tactical stuff, but what we have highlighted all pertain to mindset. So the values that you have about your life and the thoughts that you have about how you want day-to-day life to go, it's really important to be tuned into that. Everybody is different, and so this is so valuable. This is gold. Some of these key words that you just found yourself using. You value flexibility. You value friendships and relationships. You value having time to stay and chat, but you also value not being late and you value being able to finish things 100%. So, can you imagine if we could work towards being more intentional, feeling in control, and also knowing where your opportunities are to be flexible and to linger and to have it all. I always think we should be able to have it all, but we have to be realistic and we have to know what the strategies and systems and tools are that we have available that will enable us. So, what I want to do is dive into some of the specifics and show you how this can work. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds super.
Okay, so what we're going to do, this isn't necessarily going to help the people listening to the audio, but we're going to share some video, which people listening won't see, but you will hear, I'll narrate as we go through it, and I think it will still be effective. So this is the first question I always ask my clients, can you screen share your calendar for me? And let's pull back the curtains a little bit and take a look at what's going on with day-to-day life. So Lisa's going to share that with me. I know all of you listening won't see it, but you will follow along with us. So do you see at the top how you can look at the month view? So on the top right, do you see that where it says month?
When you're,
Down a little bit, down, down, down. Yep, right there.
yeah.
So don't do anything yet, but just hover there for a second. So with certainly with digital calendars, but with different planners, you have this option too. So we can look at things like this in the month view, or we can look at one day at a time, or we can look at 1 week at a time. I don't know about you, but when I look at 1 month at a time like this makes me feel very unsettled. Like I don't know what to do with this. And, it's kind of a snapshot of the month. Like if you saw that big orange thing for a week, if that was you going on vacation, I suppose that would be fun to see that that's in there. But day to day, this view is not helpful. So can you switch now to the week view? Yeah. Now, So this is, yep, this is today moving into next week. Now, look at how different that feels. So we have a handful of events. There may be 7 or 8 things that have a definite day and time. And then there's a lot of white space. That's what you were referring to. You were talking about the unstructured space in this new phase of life for you. I call that the white space. And that's where most people get stuck because when we know there's something at a definite date and time, when you know you're meeting with me at 1 o'clock, you know you're going to be there. But when you have all these things to do, but they don't necessarily have a specific deadline or date and time assigned to them, but then you do have the white space, how do you figure out what to do when? And that's when people start to get really overwhelmed.
100%. And I and I laugh just because I want to be totally transparent and not everyone can see my calendar. But Carol and I had an appointment today at 1 o'clock. It's not even on my calendar.
It's not. That's
You know,
tragic.
and I think that is sort of what has happened as a
Yeah.
result. It's like a result of what I feel by not going in there and feeling organized. I
Yeah.
kind of just these levers that I pull. And I think, obviously on a Sunday it's a little different, but it's just important to kind of note that because I feel like
Yes.
that is so indicative of
Yep.
how I've been operating. And I
And
keep
here's
here
here's
and
the
it's
thing. Right. You're a smart person, and our brains are wonderful, and our brains can keep track of a lot of information. But eventually, you're going to reach that tipping point where you start to make mistakes because it just can't hold it all in. Or you get so caught up in it might be in there, but you're so caught up in what's going on in front of you that you're not pulled back to what's in the calendar. So, yes, adjustment number one that I want to recommend for you is that anything that has a date and time attached automatically has to go into this calendar. So I should qualify that one thing that I would work on with a client is we would confirm I want you to have one master location where your main calendar lives and one master location where all of your to-dos live. So anything that comes up, whether it's an idea, someone asks you to do something, you get an email request, wherever it comes from, I want you creating that connection. Oh, this has a date and time, it goes right in the calendar. Oh, this is a thing to do, it goes right in the to-do list. Let me ask you this, where do
yeah,
things go now? Like
yeah,
when
I was
they
going to
pop,
say, can I
yeah.
interrupt because I would ask you your suggestions. So for those two primary things, um, the main location I would say for me right now is a Google Calendar that doesn't function that great. And I'll just add, not to blame Adam at all, my husband, but one of the things that we've had our entire raising of our children, and if he was here, he would agree, he keeps his own calendar and he doesn't share travel. That is a sticking point
Oh.
for us and the family. We used to use this calendar called Cozy,
Yep.
which was a beautiful thing. It was
Yep.
super simple. We could keep it separate from our work calendars. It was our family calendar. And I don't know what happened to Cozy, or maybe I don't know. But after COVID, we never used Cozy again. Um, but that calendar worked. So for me, like Adam's travel schedule is one of the things, and we won't get into that because that's our own stuff, but like that's a thing that's really hard because Adam has traveled our whole marriage. And so my flexibility, just to sort of like
Yeah.
close about my flexibility sometimes has had to reflect that travel.
Totally. So
And
you just
so-
stumbled upon another clue that the time when you were using this cozy calendar was the time when things were working really well. So
and we
that's
had no choice because the kids weren't driving. Like it was like, are you taking them at 5 to, soccer practice? Or
right.
we had to like coordinate in that way. And so that makes me laugh when I look at this. So my primary calendar has been Google Calendar. I guess I went dragging my feet from Cozy some time ago and never really adopted it.
Yeah.
So that's my primary calendar. My primary to-do list is in Notes app, and I just clear it out each day. Like if I have running to-dos, I keep them on the to-do list. And like I know some people love to see the check marks. Sometimes I do, but once they're done,
Yeah.
they're off.
So how well do you think it's working? How well do you think the Notes app is working for you as a to-do list container?
You know what? I feel like I've been leaning more heavily on the Notes app more and more, like for a million things. So I would say from an organizational standpoint, no, because it's like all just in there and you don't really have like a system.
Hmm.
But in terms of just quick, adding things in, like if I need a grocery item
Yeah.
or like book something or schedule something, that works really well because I keep it kind of at the top. It's always running.
Yeah.
But from an organizational standpoint, if I was to have multiple to-do lists for multiple things, that would never work.
Yeah, so that's another clue that your intuition guided you well and said, "Let me use this one location to write things." So that connection is made in your head, which is really good, but it may not be the right location for you because it doesn't have enough functionality to really do what you need it to do. But you're halfway there because you have that connection that I should write whatever this thing is down there. I would like to suggest that you use, this is what I recommend to my clients, the Reminders app that comes with all the phones. It's still very simple. I always want people to use the simplest system as possible because when they get complicated and they exist, these complex apps and software programs exist, but the more complicated they get, the more time you spend setting it up and color coding and tagging and blah, blah, blah. And then the less you're really using it. So I really like Reminders because it has the functionality that we want, but it's also very simple. And so we won't do it for the sake of time. We won't set that up today, but I want you to look into that. It's on your phone.
I've
Um,
used,
you,
I've used it before.
oh,
Um,
great.
yeah, there was definitely a point that I did use this. Because I have like iCloud reminders, menus, and things like that. So,
Yeah.
um, that's really funny. It's been a really long time that I haven't used this. But I
How do you
did
feel about going back to it?
great, fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
happy to have.
So what you can do is I want you to keep as few lists as possible, but it does help to separate some out. So the categories I usually recommend are to have one for home, one for work. You might separate out your work projects, like one for the podcast. I don't know if you're still doing isogenic stuff or, whatever else you have going on. So you might separate it out by different work endeavors that you have. One separate one for groceries. So you don't want to see buy milk in the middle of set up that interview with Carol. Like that just doesn't make sense, right?
I'm sure I do have that, but that's really funny.
Yeah. So we want to separate them out. I like to have a separate list for books and TV shows that people tell me about because we're always getting great recommendations. And then when you sit down to watch something, you're like, oh, where was that? And you don't know where to find it. And so if you have a designated location, you'll know where to put it and then where you can look. And so, um, you can customize it based on the things that are important to you, but you get the idea?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so we have addressed the two main things. What's your master system for the calendar, master system for the to-do list? In terms of you and Adam, a couple of recommendations that have worked for other clients of mine is that if he doesn't want to totally share calendars, which I understand not everybody wants to do that, but he could invite you to a trip so that you then get the invitation and you can add it to your calendar. So it's not that much of a load for him.
We've tried different things, so that's why I'm
Yeah.
so thrilled to just have you suggest because you can see like on the side here, I have like Adam's travel schedule populated. And so when like his travel trips, like that's something that he's like more than happy. He just doesn't want all the family stuff on his calendar.
Oh, okay.
So like if
Yeah.
like a shared Google calendar, it's just like it's too much. So
Yeah.
he kind of voyeurs into this calendar. Um, but if he was to like schedule a trip and then invite me to the trip, it gets invited through the travel platform. And then I get like a weird, it's not
Oh, okay.
through my Google Calendar, but that's just very unique to us. But I imagine that many people have lots of spouses traveling, work events at night, things like that, that have to be kind of shared within a calendar
Yeah.
um, to manage the household. And I just feel like we have not nailed that at
Yeah.
all.
So, that's a really important conversation to have, I think, because this is significant. His travel schedule, the things going on in the house, you still have one kid at home, and so there's still things you both need to know about. So that's definitely worth a conversation sitting down, like making an appointment with each other and saying, hey, let's sit down and let's see if we can iron out some adjustments. You could even ask AI, ask ChatGPT, what do you recommend for a married couple to share their calendar and see what it comes up with. But let me dovetail that with the next thing that I wanted to suggest to you, which is the weekly habit, creating a weekly habit of sitting down to set up your calendar for the week. So if anyone follows me on social media, I do this every weekend. I swear by it, and anyone I have introduced it to also now swears by it. It's really life-changing. So the idea is you pick a time. I like to do it Sunday morning. If I know I'm going to be busy on Sunday, I'll do it on Saturday, but it has to be done before I go into Monday. Otherwise, I have the Sunday scaries. I just feel like uneasy about the week. And this is the best way to make that go away. So you pick one time during the week, you put it in your calendar as a repeating event, and you really commit to sitting down, whether it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it takes to sit down and make sure everything is set up. That way, why this is so genius is you're separating out the decision making from the doing. So on in your planning session, you're deciding, first of all, you're just looking, you're giving yourself a heads up. Okay, what do we have this week? Is there anything I need to do to be ready for that? Do I need to arrange rides? Do I need to look for any mistakes? Did I double book myself? Do I need to move things around? So you're just getting the lay of the land. And then you're looking at what's left, what's the white space, and what do I want to do or what do I need to do during that time? So that's where you're marrying the to-do list with the white space on the calendar. So you're looking at the to-do list, figuring out what your top priorities are, and then assigning them a time and a day when you're going to work on them. But when you're making that decision, you don't have to actually worry about doing it. So you don't have to get all those other emotions involved when it comes to doing it, whether it's boring, whether it's hard, whether whatever you feel about it, it doesn't matter. You're not doing it, but you're just deciding, you're objectively deciding what's a priority and when does it make the most sense to do it. Like if you're really energetic and focused in the morning, then you want to do your hardest tasks in the morning and save the easier, fluffier things for the afternoon when your energy is winding down. So what I imagine for you is that you and Adam could also sit down, that you would want some time to do this for yourself, but you and Adam could sit down and you could map out travel for the week or the next couple of weeks and map out driving things and whatever else you need to work out together. So you could invite him to do that with you as well. And it's a really great conversation for a couple to have. Certainly for the calendar and the things that you need to work out together, who's going to pick up and how do you figure that out. But then also for the tasks, like what are the priorities as you get closer to the weekend? Are there things that you had in your mind that you wanted to do? Does he have things? Are there household projects? How do you decide what the priority is and who's going to work on it and how you want to tackle it? So that was a lot I just threw at you. So what's going through your mind?
Okay, so I have a couple questions. One is, um, one of my favorite things that you said was separating the decision making from the doing. Because then
Right?
there's like no room for like, I don't really feel like that. I don't really want to do that task right now, or the procrastination or whatever happens. So that I love.
Hmm.
Um, the question that I had is when you sit down and make that appointment, and I commit to doing that, and say it's like, Sunday before dinner, and I'm looking at my week, what exactly am I doing? Am I
Yes.
putting things in the calendar or am I putting things on the to-do
Yeah.
list?
Good question. So this is going to feel really different because a lot of people are used to working off a to-do list, and that's what you were saying that you've done. You have those to-dos on your notepad, and you're used to working off that. What I'm suggesting is different, is that you're going to ultimately work off the calendar, and you're going to follow the sequence. By the time you get to a given day, by the time you get to Monday, for example, and you have it all set up, you don't even have to look at your to-do list. You already know the plan. And so you're kind of putting those blinders on so you don't have to get distracted by everything else that is waiting for you. And you're just focusing on the hour by hour plan that you have made for yourself. And it's so much more doable. So there's a lot to be said of how do you get from the to-do list and how do you decide what's a priority. I feel like that might be a part two. I don't want to give you too much to kind of digest at once. So that's maybe part two of the conversation, which I'm happy to have with you. But that's the ultimate goal that I would want you to get to is that you're then working off your calendar. You map it all out, you look at the priorities, you decide what you're going to work on for the week, you give it a day and time, then you can put the to-do list aside, except for when you're adding to it, and just work off the calendar.
So you're essentially giving each task a day and time, and you're not giving a whole lot of emotion to that task. You're just finding a place for it.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Okay.
Now for you, so going back to what you had said originally, I want to address two things, and then we might pause for today and kind of give you some time to work on this, and then maybe we can come back and do a part two. But you talked about, unexpected things coming up. So, you have this great plan, but then something unexpected comes up, and now it's all, destroyed. And so now what do you do? So, two things I want to say to you about that is that everybody has a different requirement for scheduled versus unscheduled time. If you know that you really value flexibility and you thrive on it, you really love to have those extra conversations at the end of things, then you want to keep that in mind as you are planning out your days and not set yourself up to be back to back to back to back. You want to leave white space for yourself. So you're planning for that flexibility. You're intentional about that flexibility. So there will be certain parts of your day where you have a hard stop or you have a set beginning where you have to dial in the focus and say, okay, I have to leave by this time. But then you have other parts of the day when you can be a little looser. Like if you love to chat after the gym, then you probably want to leave that next hour blank and unstructured and set yourself up to succeed.
Mhm. And I think that's important too. Like it's an important distinction between like, not that I'm saying time wasting because it's really intentional. Like it's part of my being. And it's also like because I feel like if people are listening to this back, like to think about like for them, like what is that? Like so for me, a lot of my health related conversations come at the gym.
Right.
Will have questions and or people have really good feedback or something they tried or so I feel like a lot of those conversations sometimes happen there, and so that's why that's become kind of like a hub for me.
Yeah.
um, but I feel like there's other places that that happens too, and not everyone's the same. Like not everyone's super chatty. I mean, I saw someone yesterday while I was getting a pedicure, and she literally shared with me she cannot talk to people right now. Like she's like, I'm so glad I'm seeing you because we know each other, but I'm having and she was like sharing from her heart, like
Mm,
what's going on with her. Had I not like paused to have that like interaction, like that is who I am. Like I
yeah.
love that. So I think part of the calendar to get back to that, that has really kept me from making this rigid, what I thought was rigid, was because it would limit my ability to be flexible.
Right. So, what do you think about this idea at the beginning when I said, what if we could do both, where you could be intentional, be focused, move your projects along, know that there's a plan to move them forward each day or each week, but also know that you have that flexibility built in, but you're just strategic and intentional about what's a flexible block and what's a really structured, planned block. And sometimes you'll be disappointed. Like sometimes, you'll say, you might run into someone at the grocery store and say, oh my gosh, I really want to stay and chat with you. But, of course, you would never do that. I think if you had an interview scheduled with someone, I don't think you would ever blow that off because you got stuck chatting with someone at the grocery store. But if you had scheduled something for yourself, like you were going to send out 10 emails for new guests on the podcast, then you'll have a decision to make of okay, you know what, I know I have a light week, I that was scheduled today, but I know I can come back and move it somewhere else, so I'm going to stay and talk to this person. Or you work on what I call the muscle of honoring the commitment you made to yourself to say, you know what, I said I was going to be at my desk at 3 o'clock sending emails. So I'm going to shorten this conversation. I'm not going to stay, and I'm going to honor that commitment I made to myself. And there's no one right answer. So you're always deciding, which is kind of hard. But while this is new for you, I might suggest that you err on the side of honoring the commitment and just practice what it feels like to say, oh my gosh, I would love to stay and chat. I can't. I have to be at my desk at 3, but can we schedule a walk later this week? Or can we schedule a coffee?
Yeah, and that feels awesome to me. And I feel like, not everyone operates like this with all this flexibility. And I feel like that's been sort of my sticking point. But I think so many of us work from home and so much can encroach on that. there's a reason why people say, like, when I go to the office, I'm so much more productive because I don't have a sink of dishes or
Right.
like, whatever it might be. And so I think there's a combination to be had, but it's also new for everyone. We've all been doing this for like a set number of years, but not that long if you think about it.
Yeah.
And, I so enjoy all this feedback and all this important conversation
Hmm.
with, I mean, I could have thought of why wouldn't I leave more white space, but I didn't. Instead, I just resisted it,
Yeah.
and I know about resistance because I coach on it all the time with any sort of habitual changes. Like anytime you're resisting, you're pulling that rubber band tighter and it's pulling further and further and getting more and more taut. I know that logically, but it's so important to have someone like you looking over a schedule of a busy woman to say, you can still do this way.
Yeah.
And you can build in the flexibility. It's almost like when you have someone, the clothes you have, but when you have someone come who's a home organizer and they just see it different,
Right.
your
Exactly.
your lens is so different. You look
Exactly.
at so many calendars, how this can be done in a way that doesn't feel too hard for
Yeah.
the and so I appreciate that very much. And just the few pieces of takeaway that I will utilize today will be changing the to-do list, using the week view of the calendar,
Hmm.
because surprisingly, that does feel a lot more less stressful, a lot
Yep.
less stressful to me. And I'm going to sit down, today's Sunday, so that's my day to look at my week and really look at and start to plug in the things that I'm keeping on my to-do list.
Yeah.
Because I have a daily method of operation on my to-do list that's chunked in hours of time.
Hmm.
And we used to have this saying when we were doing business as a team, it was AIC, ass in chair. And
Mm, I love
I
it.
feel like I do everything to avoid that.
Yeah. Well, I would love to dissect that, but I don't want to overwhelm you. So I think I would love for us to pause here. I'm so excited about the action items that you have identified. I would love for you to report back to me. Just send me a text next week. Let me know how this week went and what you noticed, what you loved, what was hard. And I would love to do a part two recording with you. So we can kind of update people. There's so much more to say. I mean, you've heard me talk a little bit about affirmations or mantras that you can use. So I honor the commitment I made to myself. I used to write that out every single day in a notebook as I was working on my own time management and working on that muscle of, okay, if I said I was going to do it, I'm going to do it. I still I still have to utilize that. There are lots of things that I avoid. There are workouts that I plan for myself. I'm like, no, I don't feel like it, but I'm really always trying to reinforce that for myself. I said I was going to do yoga today, and so I'm going to do it regardless of how I feel or think about it. But it's a process. It is an ongoing process. So there's so much more we could say about prioritizing, using these affirmations and mantras to create the new habits, and then problem solving as things come up. So we'll pause here. We'll do a part two, and I am so excited to hear what you learn on this journey for yourself.
Thank you so, so much. I think this is so helpful, and I can only hope that it can help more people just like me. And you did say something really helpful that I think I should repeat here, which is an affirmation regarding multitasking, but it can be used for this,
Oh,
which is I'm only setting up my calendar. I'm only setting up my calendar. And so knowing that I have umpteen gazillion tabs open, that will be a mantra that I will adopt
yes.
so that I could stay on task and not be reading the health article of the day and doing this or that. And so you had shared that. So I just want to share that again because it was super helpful when you did. And I feel like sometimes you just have to tell your brain exactly what it needs
Yep.
to hear. And so I'm only setting up my calendar when I take
Yes.
an appointment. So
Thank you for circling back on that because it's so true. Once you're working on any online task, it is so easy to get distracted by the other tabs that you have open. But by virtue of what you're doing, you have to be online. And so that mantra can be really helpful to just keep self-coaching yourself. I'm setting up my calendar. I'm setting up my calendar. I'm only setting up my calendar. I'm not reading articles. I'm not going on Facebook. I'm only setting up my calendar. And it really works. So good luck. I'm so excited to hear how it goes. And thank you so much for sharing so openly today. I know there are so many people struggling in the same ways, and I appreciate so much you being willing to share so we can shine some light on new strategies for them as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Healthy Habits for Life. If you loved today's episode, please follow me on iTunes and leave a 5-star rating and review. These are so important and will enable others like you to find this podcast. Also, please share this podcast with your friends you know would also love it so we can get the word out. Thanks again for joining me. Until next week.